You ready to roll? But let's start on the one I think everybody gives a shit about. You got the first weekend of March Madness in the books. The typical fun and crazy happens. Sweet 16 starting this week. And I want to talk a little betting. I want to talk a little numbers. I want to talk a little math. I want to talk a little NIL. Boy, it's all different with NIL, isn't it, Brooks? You've been telling me that. You've been telling me that before NIL was NIL.
Yes, sir.
I got a couple stats that I think are pretty amazing. The NCAA earns about $1 billion a year on March Madness. 85% of their total income during the tournament. By the way, am I gonna get some nasty gram here because I used the phrase March Madness? Do we have to pay them licensing fees? I don't know. Maybe we're big enough that they're gonna come after us. So maybe from now on, Brooks, we'll have to call it the NCAA tournament, March tournament,
or we'll flip it, the Madness of March.
Yeah, we gotta be careful. You know, we're big timers now, Brooks.
Exactly.
We don't need that letter saying, given all the people who watched your podcast, you owe us 61 cents today. So, I listen, I'm going to send you that bill if we get that bill, okay?
Pay per viewer.
All that money, though, it's changed where some of that money goes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the NIL piece of it. We'll talk about some other stuff about what it's like to be a host city and all that kind of stuff. But let's start on the one I think everybody gives a shit about. Top couple players on NIL. How much they making this year, Derrick?
So I just read something that Shedeur Sanders is making $6.2 million for this NIL season, and it's unbelievable. You get Cooper Flagg coming in around $3.5 million. So these guys, they could opt to stay in school because you're getting paid anyway, right? Why not?
And so maybe they won't be one and done. If I'm getting paid $6 million a year, maybe I'll be two and done.
Yes, exactly.
So,
I mean, there's nothing that important. I could stay here and play, and then possibly, it reminds me back in the day when Eli Manning was coming out. He didn't want to go to the Browns, I vaguely remember. And so they forced his way to going to New York.
Right.
Players are going to be able to do that now because when they see how the draft shapes up, they'll know, like, look, I'm the first pick in the draft. I don't want to come to Philly and play for the Sixers. I'll stay another year in Duke.
But don't worry, they signed the defensive end, Miles, right over in Cleveland. So, yeah, great. Let's spend $130 million on a defensive end because that seems like the one guy you can build a team around. See, well, you don't have a quarterback. We don't have it. No, that's all right. We got a defensive end. Come here with the first pick to Cleveland. We're good.
Yes.
We're good. So, but it will change, in particular, I think, in any – most directly in the sport of basketball. Correct. Because there's such obvious value to the players, and it's even though it's a team sport, when you got 5 guys on the court instead of all the guys you got on offense, defense, special teams, like Howie said when they were at the parade, it's the ultimate team game, or Sirianni said that at the parade, the ultimate team game.
Mm-hmm.
Basketball a little bit different when you only got 5 guys on the court.
Correct. What the NCAA has been able to do over, decades is take something that should be 2 years or 3 years worth of work and condense it into just March. They make it exciting. There's people that love college basketball, can't stand the NBA, right?
Yeah.
It's because there's something about this one and done. Every team has an opportunity, these Cinderella stories, right? It's something really cool about a kid that came out of nowhere that no one knew his name becomes a household name by the end of March, right? And so now with the amount of money that has been going into this program for years, now there's going to be some share or some spill into the players. It's going to be interesting to see how players recognize their value and what they do for the next year.
Yeah, well, let me tell you my one really funny March Madness story. There was a bar in Palo Alto called the Old Pro. The Old Pro almost failed like 3 or 4 days. It's now closed. But my mentor, Bill Campbell, and a guy named Mike Homer, they basically bought it because they wanted to keep their local sports bar open. It was kind of their community service to the town was to keep the Old Pro open in Palo Alto. So the tournament several years ago, my alma mater, Lehigh, was a 15 seed playing a 2 seed.
Yeah.
That 2 seed was Duke.
Yes.
I remember that game.
C.J. McCollum.
Yeah, so I remember that game. And so I went to go watch that game. It was a rainy-ass, nasty day in Palo Alto. I went to watch that game at the Old Pro. And I had 2 Lehigh buddies with me. And we're the only 3 Lehigh guys in probably all of Silicon Valley, by the way. And there's these 3 guys at the end of the table, and they are rooting hard for Lehigh. We're thinking to ourselves, those guys, first off, they're big. Like, these guys were big. So we're like, well, we're going to go sit with these guys.
Right.
It's Andrew Luck and 2 of his linemen.
Oh, okay.
So we roll up on those 2 guys, right? And so Luck is this going to be the year he's going to be drafted.
Yeah.
He looks at us and goes, what are the chances I'm in a bar with 3 Lehigh guys? And we're looking around. We're looking around going, what are the chances what are the chances we're going to... He said, come. So we sat down. We watched that game beginning to end with Andrew Luck, his 2 linemen, I forget their names. They thought we were the celebrities because they had some authentic Lehigh guys watching the game.
Oh, yeah.
And so I didn't understand. Those guys hated Duke more than anything.
Oh, yeah.
I actually still to this day don't understand why Luck hated Duke that much. But Andrew Luck, I can tell you right now, he effing hates Duke. And we watched that game. And the thing I like to remind people about that game, which is really surprising if you ever go back and watch it again, Lehigh beat them from the tip.
Oh, yeah.
Some of those Cinderella games are a game where a couple impossible steals.
Yeah. Player gets in foul trouble.
Exactly. A bad call,
Yeah.
a lucky break. A guy gets on a shooting streak like you've never seen in his entire life.
Right.
And then he remembers who he is in the second half.
Yeah.
No, they beat them from the jump. That game was in a lot of ways actually not even really in question, even though it was a 2 seed against a 15 seed.
Yeah. I remember that game like it was yesterday because at the time, our agency, we were recruiting CJ.
Yeah.
So we represented his older brother, Eric.
No kidding.
Who is, by all accounts, a better scorer than CJ. He had 83 or 81 in a game in China.
No kidding.
Yeah, he's like unbelievable. But he's probably a little bit shorter than CJ. And so Eric kept talking about how, great his brother was. And we started watching him and we said, you know what, this is the guy. So we went and watched him play, and we had just started courting him. I think we were a little bit too late in the game. Someone else had already started before us, but we had just started courting him and his parents. And so I had a vested interest in watching CJ play against this big-time school powerhouse, right? And I think Doc Rivers' son was on Duke, Austin. And Austin was like the number 1 or number 2 player in high school. He was like phenomenal.
Yeah.
Coming out of Florida. So I really wanted to see, can this kid play against a guy like this? And you were right from the beginning. And CJ now will tell you, his first basket let him know that it was no one on that court that could stop him. And He said, I felt like if I can get the ball, we can win this game. And
I never knew that. But that's how you go watch that game back. There were not, you thinking, oh, come on, second half Duke's going to figure something out.
Yes.
It was like the Eagles in the Super Bowl. Oh, well, they're up this year, but Mahomes and Reed, they came out and they laid a turd his first drive. Same thing with Duke. I don't remember how close Duke ever got, but whatever the closeness was, it never even felt that close.
No, and you're right, so right about the Eagles in the Super Bowl because even being up so much, there's a minute left and they're down like 30 or whatever, and we're still like, there's a possibility that Mahomes could figure this out and be the only quarterback to score 30 points in 48 seconds. Yeah. You always felt like something's going to happen.
Him and Brady are the 2 guys. Yeah, him and Brady are the only 2 guys on this list. And how great is it that the 2 Super Bowl wins our teams got are against those 2 guys?
Yes.
Come on. Those are 2 good wins.
Couldn't be written any better. Couldn't be written any better.
All right, so back to some numbers on March Madness. So the NCAA makes $1 billion. They make most of it in March. But isn't there a point at which, Brooks, where some of these TV contracts don't even make sense?
It doesn't.
It doesn't. I don't know how they can make that pencil.
I don't understand it. And I mean, obviously, everything nowadays, at least from my kids' perspective, they don't even watch TV. Everything's on their phone. Everything's 30 seconds or less. The attention span is very quick. So it does baffle me a little bit how these networks can pay that. Now I know more people are in tune to sports because sports is one of those things where you cannot watch it on replay. It has to be live. So sports is kind of protected, but still you have this generation that wants to see just the highlights. So it is interesting how they figure that out.
So I don't know if I've told this story on this program before on Inside Game, but I'm going to tell it right now because it really matches with this. Spending that much money on ads means that the executives still don't understand how the younger generation consumes their content.
Correct.
I was on the board of FanDuel for almost a decade, from what was it, about 2012 to about 2020. Yeah, almost 10 years. And I remember the NBA, it was the first investment the NBA ever made. They were our co-investors. They invested in, I forget, 2014, 2015. And they did a focus group, and this is about a decade ago because it's 2025 now. It's about 2015, they did a focus group. And the focus group had 20 self-identified NBA fans. And they were all 25 or younger. I forget what their ages were, like 16 to 24 something. And said, guys, we want to just show you this little clip. This is the start of one of our FanDuel board meetings. And the question, they only showed us one clip. Question is the following. So we have 20 self-identified NBA fans. How many of you have watched a game this season from beginning to end? Show of hands. 20 people in the room. How many hands went up, Brooks?
I would say at most probably 2.
Exactly 2.
Isn't that great?
Now that's 10 years ago. So think about that. That's millennials, right? We got the full Gen Z and Gen A after that now. 10 years ago, only 2 of 20 self-identified NBA fans had watched a single game from beginning to end. And so, yes, you've got to buy the TV rights because that's the only way you can get people to watch. Well, those kids, they ain't even watching the championship game from beginning to end a decade ago. Yeah. I can only imagine what the 16-year-olds now do.
Yeah.
They watch 3 clips and act like they were there at courtside.
Correct. Because the fan experience is not what it used to be. Like the fan experience used to be, you had to see the whole game. When I worked for an NBA team, our line was there could be history made at any moment of any game, which is true.
Right.
And they don't believe that anymore. Now it's if history is going to be made, I'll watch it in a clip. I'll watch it when it comes out.
I'll tell everybody I watched the clip first.
Yes, exactly.
It really is weird. It really is weird.
In fact, if you go on any NBA clip that's a highlight and you go to the comments, there's always a comment that says here first. I was on comment section first. That places more importance than watching the entire game.
That's crazy to me, but that's how old we are, Brooks. One other aspect I want to talk about this, and I've always wondered, and I think maybe you have a little bit more insight into this. They always talk a lot about how the host cities get a bump. Let's go bid on having the championship game at our place. Remember the old Spectrum had that infamous play. What was it? The Leitner
from Duke
1.6 seconds on the clock.
From Grand Hill.
That was in Philly, right?
Yeah,
that was in Philly. Do you think any of that matters? Do you really think that really gets the people to show up to the local bars, especially with the younger kids who are going to watch a clip 3 days later and act like we're at the damn game?
Yeah, I would say it still has some appeal. I would say more appeal than, let's say, the All-Star Game was coming to your city.
Yeah.
All-Star Game's struggling in terms of having people, viewership, and then having people show up. With the NCAA tournament, it's always been this appeal. One, you have maniac college kids that do want to be there live, that do want to paint their face, and do want to. So they'll pay their money to be in whatever city it's going to be in. So hotel revenue goes up, food and beverage goes up, that type of thing. Sightseeing and tourism goes up. So I believe that it will help you if the city is a host financially. The difficult part about that is the amount that a huge company, let's say Pepsi or Coca-Cola, puts into the NCAA tournament. I don't know if they find any recourse in whatever city it's going to be in. How do they get their return on that investment they put in from, sponsoring the tournament, whether it's the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8 or whatever. But I do believe the host city gets a bump, and they actually see it from having people come into town. As a tech guy, and especially one that has been on the board for FanDuel, what do you think is the most celebrated big event? So it's March Madness on the list of things. If you had to name the top 5 or top 3, where does March Madness fall into that? Super Bowl is probably my top, right?
But
I don't know what else is.
But it's not.
It's not.
So what's weird is the weeks like 2, 3, 4, 5 of the NFL are the biggest.
Really?
There's real fall off. And then once you get down to the playoff games, huge fall off. Half your teams aren't in there.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the beginning of NFL, that September, October, those are your biggest money. That's your biggest money time. September and October are your biggest times of the year.
So I wonder if because that's an inside game that I didn't know.
But I don't know how. I mean, I'm giving you this information circa 5 years ago. I imagine it's still the same though.
I wonder if it's the same during the tournament because obviously you have way more teams. You got 64 teams in there and more betting, right?
Way more betting at the front of the.
Right.
I guarantee you, there's way more betting at the front of the tournament than the back of the tournament.
Yeah.
Way more betting in weeks two.
But the numbers are probably higher towards the back.
I guarantee you that the first weekend and the Sweet 16 weekend dwarf the betting in the next
Final
two,
game.
in the
Four
weekends, right? The Elite Eight Final Four weekend and then the championship weekend. Those first 2 weekends crushed them. Crushed them.
That's awesome.
Well, Brooks, I appreciate it. It is that special time of the year.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, let's see. Maybe we'll have another moment.
Yeah. All right, Brooks.